The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the hosts and guests as individuals, and do not necessarily reflect those of advertisers or sponsors. This show is intended as entertainment and commentary only. The producers strive for verisimilitude, but nothing said on this podcast should be taken as fact by the listener or viewer without performing due diligence.
That existence, the physical universe, is basically playful. There is no necessity for it whatsoever. It isn't going anywhere. That is to say, it doesn't have some destination that it ought to arrive at.
This is Keep Your Hat On, a show by three nerdy nobodies and one nerdy kind of somebody about nothing in particular. Keep Your Hat On is brought to you by the Narrowband Broadcast Network, NBBN. The focus is on you. By PodSquadPDX.com, Painless Podcasting, and by the kind support of KYHO fans everywhere via Patreon. Patreon. Create on your own terms. On this episode, Andrew gets us up to speed on his raging case of the cooties. Chris gets us up to speed on an old campfire standard. And Dr. Mark gets us up to speed on, well, speed. Don't do drugs, kids. Them's for critters only. I'm your ever disembodied announcer, Michael Brumage, and I only do drugs on porpoise myself. Anyway, here's Andrew, Robert, Dr. Mark, and the Kumbaya kid himself, Chris.
And hello and welcome back. This is Keep Your Hat On, the show where hell even we don't know where we're going to go. I'm Andrew Scott, along with my good friend, Dr. Mark C.E. Peterson, and Christopher Vacano, and Robert Anthony. How's everybody doing, guys?
Doing great.
Quicker than last time, Chris.
In stride, right?
Look at that. We beat the silence.
Just barely. Like two crickets.
Where are them crickets at?
Right? Well, listen, I'm going to take a quick moment here to just let everybody know that watched the last episode. The people who were listening on the audio podcast didn't get any of this because this was all visually reinforced innuendo. One of the four of us, who looks suspiciously like me, went from the recording of our last episode to deathly ill in the emergency room in less than 6 hours. Story goes like this. After we were done recording, Robert and I popped out to the store and did a couple quick things. And I had started feeling pretty ill right about that time. Now, for those of you who don't know, which is the majority of you, back when I was 15 years old, I broke my neck in a diving accident in my backyard swimming pool. And I was paralyzed for a number of years, and I made a very good recovery. I still have a bunch of gimpy issues that go along with this, but for the most part, I've lived a pretty normal life since then. However, there are a number of issues that come along with spinal cord injury, most notably bowel and bladder issues. And it's a not infrequent problem for particularly women, but sometimes men, to develop bacterial infections and UTIs because of their condition. Now, I haven't had one of these guys since about 1998 or so. But unfortunately, I also happen to not deal well with bacteria of any kind. I've been hospitalized a few times in the past for bacterial infections. And this is exactly what it was. It was a straight up bladder infection, good old E. coli bacteria. And I went from feeling okay to talking to my partner saying, maybe I should go and be seen, to we need to go to the emergency room in about an hour. I went from a temperature of about 99 degrees to a temperature of 102 degrees in no time at all. And the next thing I know, I'm being told I'm going to be here for a couple days while they pump me full of antibiotics via IV. I was in for about 36 hours and came home, and I'm fine and everything's fine and the bugs are all dying and everything's good. But it was, thank you for the modicum of applause. I'll take it. That's fine. Golf claps are accepted. But anyways, so what's been happening in the interim? Anybody got anything interesting to say?
Yard work.
Oh, yeah. Ty helped me rip out a big chunk of my deck yesterday.
That was fun.
That was fun. Destruction is fun.
Hey, Mark, you got an extra one of those?
Oh, hang on a sec. What flavor do you want?
Give me the blue.
Blue flavor.
Yeah. Well, I mean, really.
Well,
you never
blue
know.
is a flavor.
Actually, let me put the transfer thing in here, and we'll change this one. Okay, there you go.
Thanks.
There you go. Look at how we take care of each other here. Anyways, Chris, your one of the things that I wanted to talk about regarding Chris and I and some of the things that we've been doing, we're not live yet, but we're this close to merchandise.
We're working on the merch store, and by the time this podcast is live, hopefully
is that what we're shooting? Is that what we're shooting for?
That is my personal target, is to have it all hooked up and ready to go.
So if that's the case, we should probably go back and do that again.
Nah, it's all good.
So you mean our viewers and listeners can also keep their hats on while listening to Keep Your Hat On?
Exactly, with hats.
Not just their hats.
They can keep their shirt on.
Hats.
They can keep their pants on.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's never
They
fucking
can keep
alien.
their leggings on.
Exactly.
And of course, it's no big surprise to our regular listeners. We're big advocates for wearing a mask. You can now keep your mask
on. Yes. Look at that. Because again, we're coming out of this thing. I don't know about y'all, but my my standard operating procedure from now into the future is going to be out in public, wear a mask, especially during the autumn and winter. You know,
and if you're going to do that, make it a cool mask,
right? Hello.
Such a thing were available, because then
what a world it would be.
What a world it would be.
Well,
it's like last year, like the flu sort of disappeared last year.
I was just going to bring that up.
Yeah.
It didn't kind of just disappear. That is the lowest level of reported standard influenza in the United States since before World War I.
Yeah, we almost killed it off.
We really did. And actually, they are thinking now that because of this weird kind of experiment that we've all had to go through as far as mask wearing and social distancing goes, there might be a number of strains of flu that have been eliminated because of last year's masking.
And in addition, I was listening yesterday. Moderna is hoping to take the next step with their RNA.
I saw that, yeah.
And actually include the flu in what will probably inevitably be a booster.
Yeah, either a booster or a new, essentially a new seasonal cocktail.
Yeah, the way I understood it, Moderna is with that mRNA trying to be all inclusive, in that you get your booster for the coronavirus, as well as other coronaviruses.
Well, and that's the big news that I saw, is that the mRNA technology is now, they're looking at it as and they're in testing for this right now, addressing other types of
cancer.
Exactly, cancer. Yep. I'm really excited about. Yeah, I'm really excited about mRNA technology. It might be the way out of the wilderness for a whole slew of different things, from cancer to tuberculosis to dengue fever. All these things that have been really hard to treat with standardized vaccines. The mRNA technology might be a golden key into a number of communicable diseases.
Well, and the thing to know and understand is we've just broken the seal on mRNA.
Yeah,
I mean, this is new, cutting edge, and it is such a powerful tool to have in our arsenal now.
Exactly so, and I'm excited about what the future might hold when it comes to treating, like I say, a bunch of things that we've just not been able to really address effectively with standardized vaccines, partly due to how they're generated, and partly due to the fact that lots of standard vaccines are more of a shotgun versus a fly approach. And mRNA technology is very tailorable. You can literally sit down at a computer, type in a few different keystrokes, and completely tailor an mRNA solution.
And target it.
Yeah. Very highly specific targeting.
I suspect that tailor fit will not only be tailored toward a disease, but in the future will probably be tailored towards individuals.
Individuals, exactly. They're going to be able to take your genetic profile into account and what your body needs in order to make a vaccine successful. It will be tailored to you. Unfortunately, go ahead, Mark.
Did you say Taylor Swifted mRNA? Is that
that one hurt? Just saying, that one hurt.
That's that banjo RNA. I've heard so much about it. It's the Nashville variant.
The Nashville variant, yeah.
That's the RNA with auto-tune.
Oh.
Hey,
it's getting worse.
The Carter family RNA never needed auto-tune.
There you go. I agree with that. Well, I tell you what, folks, we're trying to keep this show really tight because we tried to keep it tight last time when we ran 4 minutes longer than our longest episode. So I tell you what, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to be right back, and it's going to be light and fluffy all show long. So don't sweat it. We're not going to hit you with any philosophy. We're not going to hit you with anything other than good times and laughs. And we'll be right back on the Narrowband Broadcast Network. That's Dr. Mark. That's Chris. That's Ty. I'm Andrew. I'm healing. Everything's fine. And we'll be back after this, okay? Hold on.
We'll be right back. Really.
And here we go. Oh, I just broke my ring. Yep.
Oh, the munching. I can hear the munching. Welcome back. This is Keep Your Hat on the Narrowband Broadcast Network. I'm Andrew Scott, along with my good friends Chris Vicano and Robert Anthony and Dr. Mark C.E. Peterson. And Chris, you got a little bit of
word salad.
Word salad for us this time. What are you bringing in?
So yeah, in the last week I was in a conversation and it was brought up that I probably didn't know the meaning of the word kumbaya. And
well, I don't, for the record, so this is going to be a learning experience,
or the origin. And yeah, I was so I'm going to set it up a little bit. There are really two major components to kumbaya. There's the term itself, and then there's the folk song, the folk spiritual.
Right.
Okay. So let's start with the term itself, and I'm just going to run around and do a quick polling of you guys, and just in your own words, you know, what is your interpretation of what kumbaya means?
Yeah, I have no freaking idea.
Zero. Yeah, that's why we're hearing the crickets. I got nothing here.
I've always gotten to this, I think in media, and particularly movies, we always get to this place of Kumbaya is reconciling, being good.
Oh, very nice.
Hippie vibes, good
Everybody
vibes.
coming together. Yeah.
Right.
As both an explanation and a pejorative for that attitude.
Exactly.
So it's not
Exactly.
Kumbacha, my lord.
Kumbacha.
Kumbacha.
That sounds totally Vulcan.
We will be getting to mushrooms
Romulan.
later. Go on,
Right,
go on,
exactly.
Chris.
Yeah, so we'll get to we'll bring the kombucha into the discussion at some point.
Ho, ho, ho.
So that is the perfect setup, because that is it's commonly embraced today in mainstream vernacular as being sort of a pejorative, a sort of a cynical take on this naive idea of ignore our differences and come to compromise too readily, too naively, not very practical. Like you said, hippie vibes, fluff. That was an idiom that came into sort of our cultural vernacular in the 90s as a backlash to the really big interest in that particular spiritual. And it was recorded a number of times by a number of high-profile folk artists, including Joan Baez, Pete Seeger, and so on.
Yeah.
During the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, it was part and parcel of that whole ecumenical attitude that came out of the 50s and the 60s and 70s, I should say, about, as you were saying, looking past your differences and trying to find commonality.
It was also tied very deeply into the civil rights movement.
Yes.
At that time, and so this vernacular came out as a backlash, and really sort of came into the common consciousness in the 90s, and that's kind of, I think that's kind of the way, and certainly the way I was thinking about it when I first started down this path of investigating and learning. What I uncovered is really fascinating. So we're going to start with the term itself, because that's the easiest piece, and then the folk song is the origins. The story is just fascinating.
All right.
So the term itself is actually it's from the most likely explanation, and there's.
I was just going to say, how much
still
of this have you sussed out as being apocryphal versus?
Well, I was using Library of Congress as my research.
Okay,
so,
no slouch there.
Them
All right.
again.
Yeah. Oh, those guys.
Fake news.
And by the way, we will be sharing links to what I
of course,
used as
down
my
below,
research.
as
if
always.
you
I'm just
want to
getting
read
back
more.
into the. I'm just getting back into the headspace of the whole fact-based universe thing. It'll take me. It's still going to take me a year or two to get back.
Right?
To that.
Yeah. Anyways,
Go on,
Chris,
I'm
press
sorry.
on.
So the currently accepted thinking is, and it's still a little difficult to prove, is that it originated. It's actually a Gullah term. Now, Gullah is a dialect of English, but it's also a culture that emerged. It's basically Gullah, or Geechee is the other term that's used, describe freed black slaves who formed a community, formed a culture, and had their own dialect of English, and they're sort of pegged regionally as being from Cape Fear, North Carolina, at the northernmost point, down to Jacksonville, Florida.
Yeah, and then there's some crossover in the Haitian community and the
Bahamian.
Bahamian, a little bit as far as Cuba and Hispaniola and all that business. So yeah,
A little bit of that. Yeah,
I'm familiar more with Gullah culture as far as its influence on food goes. I'm not super familiar with it as far as its impact.
Exactly. I mean, there's Gullah Creole, and Gullah is basically a Creole culture.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting within Gullah culture because they even break down the identification more deeply, that there's coastal lowlands who are termed freshwater Geechee.
Okay.
And then there are the islands,
right?
The offshore islands, and those are the saltwater Geechee.
Okay.
But the language is generally the same, or the dialect is generally the same across both groups.
I'm I'm going to throw
Gullah.
one other little thing in here just as an aside. If anybody is interested in learning a little bit more about Gullah culture as it pertains to food, but it does delve in pretty deeply into a number of social aspects, look up the Anthony Bourdain episode on Gullah culture on his show. We're crossing over on the third anniversary of Anthony being gone from us, and we're all very sad about that. But yeah, that's really one of the best points that I can think of to refer to Gullah culture. Anyways, so onwards, Chris. Sorry.
Sure, absolutely. So the term itself, in the Gullah language, in the Gullah dialect, I keep saying language, and I mean dialect because
Right.
it's English, is actually "come by here." That is essentially the meaning. And so when you connect that to the folk song, now we start to pivot over to
It's a gathering call.
to the folk stuff. Well, actually, "come by here." If you think about it, the song is "Kumbaya, Lord," right?
You're right.
It's an appeal to God to come help to help people in distress. And as you go through the song, you start to see that, and you start to understand that this is an appeal. This is a come help the people that are suffering.
Okay.
And if you think about it, that makes a lot of
now that you
sense.
mention it, it makes a fabulous amount of sense.
Yeah.
Sounds
I mean,
right.
it
Right?
just it's incredibly logical. Okay, now let's talk about the origins of the folk song itself, because this is where the story gets weird, highly disputed, and incredibly fascinating all at the same time. And in a sense, it's kind of a quintessentially American story in one or two ways.
Right. Start out. Who is most commonly credited as having written the song we're familiar with?
Well,
Or is that already in dispute?
that's already in dispute. I mean, that is the crux of the dispute.
Okay.
Let me back into it historically. And so we start today and work our way backwards. Now, as I mentioned before, the song experienced a huge revival during the 50s and 60s when folk artists took a major interest in it. And of course, today, actually stepping forward today, it's commonly sung at scout camps, summer camps, Sunday school. It's used in a lot Fire
Fire pits.
It's
Around the campground.
fire
Drum
pits,
circles.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it really is very much a piece of American folk music. So we start to work our way backwards, and we get to 1939, I believe it was, or 1936. I've got to check my facts on that. I'm pretty sure it's 1939. An individual named Reverend Martin V. Frey, a white evangelical pastor in the South, I believe South Carolina, actually filed a copyright and claimed to have authored the song under the terms "come by here." But the structure is the same. And his story is that the song came to him as part of a vision during prayer. And this is where it has a little bit of personal interest to me. During deep prayer, a vision of a street evangelist here in Portland, Oregon named...
Wait, what?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Named Mother Duffin. Now, I tried researching.
Forgive me
Mother
while I
Duffin.
type Mother Duffin into Google.
I couldn't find a thing.
Okay.
I think it's entirely made up.
Right.
This guy is sketchy as all get out anyway.
Well,
That he filed the copyright on this sheet music, and I'll get to why he's sketchy in a minute. But go ahead.
we already know why.
Sketchy preacher.
A sketchy preacher from the deep South that's evangelical. Come on, what could go wrong there?
Stealing folk music from African American former slaves.
Yeah. That's a
Yeah,
stretch.
that.
Come on, there's never going to be a greasy priest coming out of that area.
Okay, so
Well,
carry
and
on,
this is-
Chris.
go on,
Sorry.
anyway.
Yeah, this is where it starts to get interesting. So we go backwards further to 1926, and between 1926 and 1927, the American Folk Archive was being set up, and apparently a friend of the guy who was setting up the Folk Archive, and I don't recall his name, was a teacher in North Carolina, and he had collected. He had basically, as it turned in as an assignment from one of his African American or Black students, she had written down the version of the song that she had learned, passed down through family tradition, and he turned that over to the archive to be included in the archive. So,
I think when you're talking about the archive, I think you're talking about Alan Lomax's recordings.
The Archive of American Folk Songs?
Yeah, that's when Lomax went out in the 20s and 30s and was recording everybody. Yeah,
actually, I'm talking about the American Folklife Center, and it was formed. Let's see, it was. I can't remember who formed it. It's in the reading. It's in the links.
And again, links below. We'll hunt it down after.
Don't be lazy.
So they're pulling together all of this folk material, and I my sense is, as revealed in his actions, this school teacher his head was in the right place. He was trying to document and preserve a piece of culture, an article of culture. And that was his only intention. He wasn't trying to lay claim to it. He wasn't trying to make any money off of it. He just wanted to make sure it was protected.
Right.
So he passed it over to the American Folklife Center as it was being built. So that's one piece of evidence that immediately pops Reverend Frey's bubble, because there are striking similarities between what this teenage student turned in and what Reverend Frey claimed was his work of authorship.
Okay.
So wait,
there's another piece of evidence.
While we're here,
ahead. I'm sorry, Reverend.
I just wanted. So we had Reverend Frey, and before that, we've got this kid that submits it. Do we know, is it still considered evangelical at this point?
I wouldn't say evangelical at that point. I would say spiritual.
Yeah.
It was a classic Black spiritual folk song.
So probably
a traditional song. Yeah.
And that's the part that I'm not hunting down yet. Was this song based from an Afro-American spiritual, or was it penned by a white dude who was trying to pass it off, or
Yeah, and actually, I skipped over one of the points in history that also makes this question more complicated. In the early 1950s, the claim was made that the song was brought across from Angola. Mm-hmm. It was brought across to America from Angola. That was pretty quickly dismissed. And disrupted. But at that point, you've got this battle between, it's either an African song or it's a white evangelical song.
Right.
Right. And so we get into the 1926 evidence. We get this teenager, and we get another piece of evidence, which is a recording made in 1926 on a wax cylinder of a group of Gullah people singing it by somebody else who wanted to document, capture, and preserve. And he also turned that over to the archive. That was a gentleman named Robert Winslow Gordon. And he captured it. The cylinder's not very good. It's a wax cylinder. It hasn't held up very well, but it stands as a solid piece of evidence that this song existed as early as 1926. What we can sort of deduce from all of this is that this was a traditional Gullah spiritual folk song that was commonly heard throughout the Deep South, in the lowlands and out on the islands, and along the way through its history, people have tried to pick it up and say, this is mine,
right.
Or actually, people with differing agendas. There's the "this is mine" piece, and and you know,
then you've got the "It's from here" piece.
It's actually its specific origin is just indeterminate.
So who holds the rights today?
I don't think anybody's got rights.
I think it's.
Calling.
I so want to apologize for that.
That's okay.
I think
it's never fucking aliens though. So
it's never fucking aliens.
The 1930s copyright has expired.
Yeah, it would have 70 years,
and so it's now considered public domain.
Right. When does it start to get drawn into our contemporary public consciousness?
That would be in the 50s during the folk revival and the folk
my question could also be phrased as, when does Pete Seeger get a hold of it?
He gets a hold of it in, I believe he recorded it in 1956.
Yeah,
sounds right.
So that's kind of it in a nutshell. And you know, for me, one of the things that was really interesting in the research is I kept hearing references to this Marvin Frey, and I went hunting for him, and I was like, because I had this suspicion, but it was never explicitly stated.
Right.
I couldn't find any pictures of him, and I was like, my suspicion, of course, was that he was a white man.
Right.
And you know, a bit of my point of view is, you know, I'm sure this is a white guy because that's American history.
Well, and that is something that, you know, now in this day and age, we're actually starting to get a much greater understanding of. And I know that there are many people out there who rail against this and you know, get dragged backwards by this whole issue. But what of our popular culture has been stolen or misappropriated, or
rock and roll?
Yeah, exactly, the whole thing, and
all of it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I mean, gosh, if you really just want to talk about white music, you are going to be one bored listener, you know. Mm-hmm. But I think that this is a good thing that happens, being able to look back and really recontextualize things, their origins, and where they came from, because I speak for me personally in that every time something like that happens, even to something that I thought was kind of set in stone as far as its origins go, when the real origins come out, I always find those origins much more rich a story.
Way more interesting.
Than Alan Freed sitting there, you know. And I mean, don't get me wrong, Alan Freed's an important person in our society and culture as far as popularization of music goes. But, you know, I always kind of think back to the Living Color song, where they, you know, say they crowned Elvis king, but a white man taught him how to sing. I'd much rather learn the reality of where things come from, because then it broadens my view on all of my history, and that's only good.
Absolutely. And yeah, you know, as we've discussed before, the real story behind things is just much more interesting and much richer, and we have more to gain by looking at that than the simple narratives, you know, and how it went from what strikes me about this particular piece of music and this term is how it's been passed off through all sorts of different sets of filters through time, and it's gone from a place of an appeal for help, right, to a cynical, jaundiced view about cooperation.
Yeah. Thanks, you know, thanks, modern life. Yeah,
it does sound like initially it was an invitation.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. More than the end result.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. So. Well, you know, word salad is always a tasty treat. And with that, we're going to take another quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about drugs. So stay tuned. This is Keep Your Hat On. That's Ty. That's Chris. That's Dr. Mark. I'm Andy. This is the Narrowband Broadcast Network. We'll be right back after this. Stay tuned.
All right. Bathroom break.
I knew it. Go pee, my son. Alexa, play the latest episode of Keep Your Hat On podcast on Amazon Music.
Here's Keep Your Hat On from Amazon Music.
So that's a thing you can do now. And hello and welcome back. This is Keep Your Head On, the show where hell even we don't know where we're going to go. I'm Andrew Scott, along with Christopher Vacano and Robert Anthony and Dr. Mark Peterson. And Mark, you stumbled over something here in the last couple days that kind of piqued your interest. And where are we going?
So as I always say, don't do drugs, kids. I mean, don't do meth. So what we found was, I stumbled on this in the News of the Weird, where I sort of live, and it turns out, and this goes back to actually 2013 was when they first noticed this. There was a BBC like secret camera. They were studying porpoises.
Yeah, it was in the pod, I think is what it was called. I'll put a link down below.
I remember seeing this, in fact, but I don't remember this episode.
Right.
And I'm just going to cut to the chase on this thing because there's no point in hesitating. They spotted porpoises playing around with pufferfish. And
so for people who don't know, pufferfish are about the size of your fist, a little bit bigger. And when they get upset or attacked, they blow up. I think the most famous pufferfish was probably the one that they put on The Simpsons. But yeah, anyways, so they got a little spiky business and everything, and they're like, stay away from me. I'm big enough that you can't swallow now.
Also famous because there is a sushi that gets made with pufferfish.
Fugu.
But you have to be only like certain licensed sushi chefs are even allowed near this stuff, because if you get it wrong, you kills you.
Yeah.
All right. So they noticed that these porpoise were like passing this pufferfish back and forth for like 20 or 30 minutes at a time. Now, porpoise, when they eat stuff, they're very efficient. They boom, chow down.
Yeah, if you ever look at the mouth of a porpoise, man, that's the business end of that mammal.
Yeah, they know what they're doing.
Right?
And so they realized after a while that these porpoise were actually getting high off the pufferfish by passing, and that's why they were passing it around like a joint, back and forth.
Right.
And they weren't just just chewing down and eating it. They were actually like licking it, and apparently something about the way they were handling the fish was helping get them smashed.
Sort of like sharing the LSD sugar.
I want to know
I have a very funny
how they figured it out and why the puffer, because the puffer is very, very poisonous.
Yes, it is.
It's like licking toads for a while. There was that popular.
I'm not licking toads.
Right. There was that whole licking toads thing. And
that's still a thing.
And you have to remember, porpoise are smarter than we are. Let's just face that.
Very much so.
That's just what I want to say. How the hell does the puffer decide? Yeah, I'm not going to go full blown. I'm going to let you pass me around.
Well, I don't think it has much by way of input in this dynamic, because it's blown up. When a pufferfish is blown up, it's not particularly agile or mobile. It is there. It's in a protecting state.
Yeah.
So, but if you watch the footage of this, what's really interesting is you can tell those dolphins are being, link below. The dolphins are being very careful in handling this pufferfish. Gentle. Yeah, I would go so far as to say gentle. And I guess to use an analogy, it'd be like, man, this is my best glass piece. Don't drop this.
Well, I was trying to figure out how you would say in porpoise, don't bogart that pufferfish.
Right? My friend. Pass it on over to me.
My question
exactly. pass it to the left-hand fin? What is like,
if the puffer wanted to, surely the puffer could excrete enough poison to actually kill.
Well, that's a question.
To do that deliberately.
Now, keep in mind,
puffers don't get to do that on purpose.
I think so. And actually, if you watch the footage that we all watched at the beginning, when they showed the shot of them getting the pufferfish, whether I don't know if it's in the middle of things or you can see the pufferfish puts out I think it might be a pink cloud. So that was obviously like an initial release of toxin. I don't know enough I am not an ichthyologist. I don't play one on TV. I don't know enough about how they deliver their toxins, if it takes them some time to, I don't know, set up a second dose or blast or whatever. But the other thing is that animals are very good at tuning, or Mother Nature is very good at tuning an animal's biology to know when something is dangerously toxic and avoid it. Now, this goes, and this is the interesting part of this to me, this goes to, again, dolphin intelligence, which is so long and thanks for all the fish.
Well, wait, though. These guys have left the pod. These guys are the adolescents. These guys are the punks.
They really are the punks. That's what they made it clear that these are young dolphins out rabble rousing.
Yeah, you can see the piercings and tattoos.
And that also, part of me says, well, at least they're doing this and they're chilling out and they're not being rapey dolphins like dolphins are wont to be.
They can be, it turns out.
Yeah, they're really kind of dolphins. We anthropomorphize them because they have that permanent grin on their face and everything. They're kind of bastards. They can be really douchey.
One of the things that's missing from the storyline here is that this is Tetrodotoxin. It's called Tetrodotoxin.
Yeah, Tetrodotoxin.
And this is the stuff that can kill you and me pretty quick. But the line in all of every article I found, so this probably goes back to some original, piece somewhere on the interwebs.
Yeah.
It says, according to experts, however, for porpoises, this has a narcotic effect when consumed in small amounts. Now, it's like I tried to look for who these porpoise high exports were. Can you imagine telling your mom that that's what you want to major in college?
Yeah.
But actually, you can, Andy. I wasn't able to find out who these experts are.
No,
so
and
the thing is, the thing that I get, and I got that from the just watching the footage, was narcotic in small doses, which is making me wonder. Because some of those guys seem to be holding on to that pufferfish a while. So is it secreting a certain amount? Is it grabbing it at a certain time to get that certain amount? Or is it they instinctively
That's a question.
know?
And the other thing is that there's a dramatic difference often when it comes to chemical compounds between oral ingestion versus direct into blood system injection, where
they are not mainlining these pufferfish.
Right, exactly. And again,
it's kind of more like a puffer gummy.
Maybe. The blood-brain barrier. The blood-brain barrier is significant in all mammals. That's one of the important differences between mammals and other animals. Is we have a blood-brain barrier where our brain and our nervous system is essentially isolated from the rest of our system. And getting through that blood-brain barrier often is the difference between toxicity and psychoactivity. But your story, Mark, brings me to another little interesting factoid in the animal kingdom.
I just have to express one more idea before we jump to the species. Is I'm trying to imagine porpoises snorting a pufferfish by holding it on the blowhole.
Can you snort?
That was an image I just couldn't let
No,
go
I'm totally with you there. That's fine.
Onward.
Onward
into the animal kingdom.
The inhalants.
But inhalants. Yeah, exactly. They're
when they say narcotic,
they're not pufferfish, then they're hufferfish. Thank you.
I'm done. I'll give that drum roll.
The mammals, for the most part, are the animals that we zoologically understand have more sensitivity to psychotropic toxins or things that are ingestible. there's a number of famous studies, back in the 40s and 50s, after the discovery of LSD, where they're giving LSD to like insects, particularly spiders, to see if it affected how they did their webs. And we do know that for the most part, it is a phenomenon that occurs in mammals. And personally, my favorite, aside from there's plenty of footage, we'll put some footage up down below, of animals that eat rotting or fermented fruit that get wasted drunk on
elephants, right?
Famously. Yeah, the elephants do it. A number of primates do it. They'll get wasted drunk on the ethanol that has been created by fermenting fruit. And anybody that was a very bored teenager at one point in their life probably has been exposed to somebody making hooch in a plastic bag with a bunch of peaches and pears and wow.
There you go. Hard cider. It isn't just for hipsters.
I was going to call it the good old days, but there wasn't much good in those old days as far as that goes for me. But there are a number of animals that we are now understanding not only do this accidentally, but as is the case with the dolphin and a number of others, are actively seeking out things that will have a psychotropic effect. And my favorite, link below, and actually I'll be able to fly this footage in here because it's freely available on YouTube, is the beautiful Amazonian jaguar, the largest apex feline predator in the Americas.
Poetry in motion.
Oh my God. I love watching those things. It is just nothing. That animal is
creatures.
Nothing but business, except when it wants to trip balls. And they discovered a number of years ago that jaguars in particular will seek out in the Amazon a particular vine called Yage. And for any psychonauts out there in the audience, you'll immediately go, Yage. Yage is a vine. It's very common in the Amazon. And it contains a number of harmala alkaloids. And harmala, if you've done any herbalism here in North America, we most notably get harmala from Syrian rue seeds. And it's often used in tincture making because it is an MAO inhibitor. And so when you ingest an MAO inhibitor, it holds open the receptors of certain parts of your brain so that compounds that would not normally be orally active can be orally active. And it has its own effect profile psychotropically, most notably as at high levels, it's a deliriant. At low levels, it acts kind of like a sedative narcotic. And as we all know, if you live with cats, if you live with any kind of cat, you got hairballs. Hairballs are not an accidental thing. Hairballs, your pet will eat a number of things. My late cat Jasmine was a plastic muncher and would eat plastic. Right? Yeah, Rob, you got plenty of stories, I know. But they will eat a number of indigestible things in order to help draw up fur that they've swallowed and get it out of their system. And wildcats are no different. They'll often eat roughage, and not only roughage, they will eat things that are peptically sour in order to force a regurgitation. So finding a jaguar in the tropical jungles eating vines, no big deal. However, the jaguar specifically will go out and find the Yage plant and eat them. And frankly, lay down, roll around like a giant deadly kitten and flail all around. And if you'll see here, I'll put it up right here. Those eyes are of a cat tripping balls.
Wow.
And we have noticed that there are a number of other animals that have behaviors like this. I think the most notable one, and this is still area of some minor dispute amongst anthropologists. But most famously, caribou, particularly in Lapland, will search out the fly agaric mushroom. Now, the fly agaric, here's a picture as well, is that classic toadstool that you will see in things like Alice Through the Looking Glass. It's the red cap with the white spots and
Mario Brothers.
Exactly, the Mario Brothers. And that'll take us down a whole different rabbit hole.
Amanita.
Amanita muscaria, also known as the fly agaric. I will say this without saying too much. I'm very familiar with this mushroom. Yeah, what a ride. Anyways,
it's pretty. It's a pretty hard.
The caribou will search out this mushroom, eat it, and flip their antlers. And it's one of the things that apocryphally, a number of people are thinking that might be where we get the idea that reindeer fly. Because one of the side effects of this is a very heightened sensitivity, particularly in the peripheral vision. Now, I grew up, and Mark lives in the land of hitting a deer in the wintertime with your car.
Oh, yeah.
One of the techniques that we were taught as kids when you're driving in the winter, especially in a good old driving snow, is if you're on a stretch by yourself where the road's nothing but culverts all the way down, going through fields, flash your brights a couple of times, because if there are deer on the side of the road, they will see that shifting of their shadow and it'll spook them out well in advance so you can hit your brakes in time.
So you could hit them really good.
No, don't even say that, man. I've hit a number in my day and it's always a trauma.
It's not cool, dude.
No.
It can't possibly. I think.
Well, the technique works.
Thing for me is the biggest animal I've ever had the displeasure of hitting is a squirrel, and that is traumatic. I can only imagine.
Oh,
several hundred pound.
Yeah, and the last time I did it, I was really lucky. I had really good training, and my old man taught me, if you're going to hit him, hands at 10 and 2 and drive straight through him. Because as soon as you're on a snowpack road and you're going left or right a little bit to try to avoid him, you are going to spin that car, and you will wind up in the ditch. But anyways, this sensitivity that they have to light and shadow in their peripheral vision can be exploited if you flash your blinkers. But when it comes to this idea of flying reindeer, the fly agaric is a very, very powerful experience. These animals search this out. But if you're talking about caribou coming up close to a fire where the fire is moving and everything, sure, their shadows would be dancing behind them. The fly agaric is not a trance-inducing mushroom. It is a very stimulating mushroom. So I totally understand the idea that these caribou would see this and just jump, and literally fly. One of the other interesting aspects, though, is that they're not doing it for nutrition. We know that because one of the things that happens when you're talking about psilocybin and the psychoactive compounds in mushrooms is that our guts are very inefficient at pulling that material out of, I guess I'm going to say, your dose. So when you urinate it out, your urine is psychoactive. You consume that urine, or I don't know, your friend consumes that urine, they're going to trip balls as well. There's plenty of party in your pee to go around.
And you have to trip before you did that.
So we're going to split this.
Yeah.
But here's how we're going to split it.
Well, and there's a number of shamanic traditions from Lapland all the way into the taiga and tundra of Russia where they do this. And the interesting part of that is, and this goes back to the reindeer know what's up, is the reindeer will often, where a reindeer urinates, other reindeer will come and eat that snow, but...
Don't eat the yellow snow?
Exactly. I wish I could put Zappa in here, but I can't. But the other interesting thing is, obviously, the shamans learned this, and they will very often collect reindeer urine to go on vision quests with that. But The reindeer will follow the shaman when they're under the influence and peeing in the snow, and the reindeer will consume the snow with the urine of the shaman in it as well. So the reindeer know what's going on, and they are actively seeking out this altered state of consciousness. And that whole thing goes, and we're going to keep this part really brief. If anybody's interested in some interesting research from the past, there's a guy who came up with the likes of Ram Dass and Timothy Leary back in the day, named John C. Lilly. And John C. Lilly was a very interesting dude. And interesting is both italicized and bolded in quotes because interesting don't cover it. But he did a lot of research back in the 50s and 60s trying to communicate with dolphins. He's also the granddad of the isolation tank, the float tanks that are now so popular. He did research. He literally lived with dolphins, not out in the water. He had the dolphins with them in a dolphin tank. He did some questionable research too,
Yes, he did.
where he dosed dolphins with LSD. And he would take LSD at the same time because he was convinced that LSD was opening up channels in the human psyche.
Each other.
Exactly. Yeah. So that maybe, I don't know, suddenly all the little whatever the dolphins do would actually suddenly make sense to him. He died with some level of ignominy. But what's interesting about him is that for all his weirdness and I mean, there was some shit that he did that was really, really, really out there. A lot of his science and a lot of his research is still referred to this day because he was the only one that was doing it. He was kind of doing it off the radar. He was affiliated with a number of research institutions for quite a while, including SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. He was a member of SETI, and SETI actually had, or has, I'm not entirely certain, an internal order of people, I believe it was linguists, and they called them the Order of the Dolphin. So plenty of weirdness there to go down as far as rabbit holes, or I guess dolphin holes? No. The
blowhole.
The blowhole, exactly. But I think that's what we got for you today, folks. Again, we were trying our best to be short on delivery today. But once again, we want to take a minute to let you know that our merch shop is going to be coming online. And so hopefully by the time that you hear this, you will be able to go to kyhopodcast.com/shop and start looking at all our groovy shit. And the other thing is, if you've got ideas for merchandise that you want to see us be able to offer out to you, email us at talkback@kyhopodcast.com, but also do us a favor, follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter, and of course, if you'd like to kick us a few shekels in order to help defray the costs of this wondrous production that we do here, you can always head over to patreon.com/NBBN, link below.
I just wanted to add on the merch shop, the profits from the merch sales go entirely to
my pocket,
help us cover the costs of producing. Very funny.
Under my mattress
of producing the show.
No, exactly, and that's what we're not here to be rich. We're floating the boat on this thing ourselves right now, but any little bit that we get in helps. And so, yeah, Chris, thanks for bringing that up. We've got a couple we've got a couple of Patreon supporters that are helping us out right now. But we'd like to grow, and we'd like to be bigger and better and have many more hats to wear. I've only got the one fez right now, so I feel partially naked. But until next time, everybody, again, thanks so much for joining in. Grab your hats, keep them firmly in place, and we will see you next time. Again, this is Keep Your Hat On. For Dr. Mark and Chris and Robert, I'm Andrew, and this is Keep Your Hat On, because we may end up miles from here. Thanks a lot, everybody. Take care, wear your mask, get your shot, be good to each other, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Well, there's a chunk of time you can't get back. From Portland, Oregon, this has been Keep Your Hat On, a big little show about a whole lot of nothing in particular. Keep Your Hat On is a narrowband broadcast network production in association with PodSquadPDX.com. Andrew Scott, executive producer. Robert Anthony and Chris Vicano, associate producers. Our theme music was written and produced by Andrew Scott, along with help from Ron Kajawa. Website design and maintenance by Vicano Creative, Chris Vicano Webmaster, available at vicanocreative.com. Audio and video production by Andrew Scott, available at andrewscottmedia.com. Got ideas or comments for the show? Email us at talkback@kyhopodcast.com, and don't forget to like, click, and subscribe. On behalf of the boys, I'm your announcer, Michael Brumage. Thanks for listening. I guess.
Out. Okay, Chris, let's do word salad first. I think we're just going to wrap up the rest of the episode with nothing but animals on drugs.
NBBN.
The Narrowband Broadcast Network.
The focus is on you.